But I did notice one thing straight away, and that was that the instruments that they were using looked like somebody built them in their garage. When you opened them up, they looked like they had parts that looked like they came out of a 1932 radio. And in fact, that was about right. Yeah. That was about right. It was, I think it was Les Paul who took apart a radio and put the parts in his guitar. And that's where it all started. So you discovered... Basically, the guitars in 1966 were identical. They still had magnet, the coil of wire around it, 6 screws in the top of the magnet, and sometimes not even the screws, but often the screws. They had a wax capacitor and a cheap potentiometer. That was it. And crude, very crude. The wiring looked like the wiring I used to take out of old radios from World War II, and from old wooden house radios. The insides of those radios, the capacitors, the parts, the pots, the wires, everything looked the same as what you'd find in the back of a Gibson or a Fender or whatever. And the bodies themselves didn't seem to be all that well constructed. And I thought, well, hey, number one, the amplifiers and the instruments look like they're from pre-World War II, and here we are with a technology that is putting things in orbit around the Earth. And I thought, what has changed? In the days of Bach, the highest technology that man could produce built the organs that he played. And here, the musicians, the equivalent of Bach, modern musicians that are writing and playing music, are forced to play with something that looks like it belongs to World War I, World War II period.
1967, the recording sessions were done in some kind of orderly form. Songs had been selected, arrangements had been made, musicians had been hired, studios had been booked. Artists came, either sang overdubs or sang live. We then proceeded to add and sweeten strings, so forth, got into the mixing stage, and out came a record. Now these guys came along, and none of that applied. Didn't have all the material ready. Went in the studio, experimenting with sound. It was like kids in a candy store for them, in that they got to work with all this great equipment. They were talking whatever was state of the art. They were availing themselves of it and going to school on it. And we were dealing with, yes, a counterculture and, yes, a new method of recording, but also there was the element of chemicals involved here, which never had been a factor up until that point with the acts that we dealt with. Or if it had been, it certainly was under control and didn't show itself in the studio. So these guys were stoned part of the time, living in a fantasy world and looking for sounds that may not even be possible. I remember one long meeting when Phil Lesh leaped to his feet and said he's got it. And all eyes turned to Phil, and he said, we'll go to Los Angeles on a heavy, smoggy day, and we'll record 30 minutes of heavy air. And now there was dead silence after that. And then he said, then we'll go to the desert, and we'll record 30 minutes of clear, crystal clear air, and we'll mix that. And that will be a rhythm track.
One of the things that we
from Mountain Girl after her trial up here, when the judge speaking, the judge, he says, you're just a tarnished Galahad. A tarnished Galahad. Right. The judge, he says that. I get that in a clipping from the States. Have you ever had anybody tell you was a tarnished Galahad? Well, I wrote this song. That's mighty loud.
We were made to work and keep working year after year, you know. The first time I went to England, it was the second day I was there, and everybody went away and left me alone with a case of Retsina. Suddenly I realized, you know, here I was in London, the city that I'd always dreamed of going to, and I was very, very happy. I felt that I'd come home to some psychic place, you know, maybe maybe the home of Robin Hood and Peter Pan, you know, whatever. And mind you, I only drank half a bottle of this Retsina, but it was having the whole case there that was important. And I sat down, I wrote Ripple and To Lay Me Down, and broke down Palace that afternoon. It was.
After all is said and done over the years and all the shit that's gone down, I'm very grateful to them for the joy they've brought to all of us, and I consider them friends, the Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead begin setting up. They are the house band at the Big Beat. You can see at once why the Dead and Kesey get on so well, given the mix of overwhelming cosmic stuff and laid-back days favored by both. When the Dead start playing, none of the prankster lunacy or tape loop sagas stops for 1 second. I try making a cold, professional assessment of the group while I still can. I begin taking inventory of the band members. Okay, there's the lead singer, a paunchy Hells Angels type with dirty hair down to his tits and greasy leather vest covered with mojo pins. There's a Mexican-looking guitar player with pyramid hair, a receding chin, and a missing finger. The bass player has a full Prince Valiant page boy do. There's the second guitarist, a startled, long-haired child who could be a girl. And then there's a surly juvenile delinquent on drums, a sorrier-looking bunch.
We'll have a panoramic view to this thing. The Earth's going to tilt a little bit. Natural catastrophes are happening everywhere. All the forms are dead. You know, you can handle, say you talk to a policeman, you know, all forms are known. Come in here yesterday and jumped and jittery around, and so it looked like I was high, so I just let people think I was high. Everybody has forms. Everything's known, and the forms are changing. There's no life in the forms. Life goes where the new forms are, so you're not going to have... all this is all hindsight that you're talking about. It's already too late. The Pentagon is taking care of all that. We're doing this deliberately, as far as that goes.
The Pentagon is doing what deliberately?
In summer February that we were in, on Sepulveda Boulevard at Studio City. And Keith Olsen was a taskmaster, but he was a fun guy, man. We had a lot of fun with him.
Yeah.
And
some of it we even remember.
I actually had to nail the studio door shut. Ramrod and I nailed these guys in there because everybody just kept popping out in our usual style, you know.
Well, they had... That we've overloaded everything and the final fuse is blown. The helicopters will still be flying out the wounded, and the green-tabbed acid takers will be saying to one another, I took that green stuff and I feel great. What's all the hassle? Yeah, you know, I mean, I can only be scared so long until I want to start saying, hey, man, I trust you, you know, if you're going to give me some stuff, it's a bummer. I'm not going to quit taking it just because, you know, to blow the trust. It's incredible. We need a roving mic to go out there, you know, everybody could say it.
Resting from the very start. Mickey Hart was at that session, and he had this drum around his neck, and he was going along like a drummer boy at a battlefield, perhaps, although it was much more placid than a battlefield, though in a larger metaphorical sense, a battle was going on outside. This was, after all, 1968. And he was going around to get this stereophonic effect of walking while Jerry was playing. So the band, even then, was playing with stereophonic effects and in the mix, which definitely went into the final version of Anthem of the Sun, with the spreading of the sound around and just like taking a hose and moving it around.